Saya nggak mau hasil dari pelatihan saya cuman ya udah uangnya habis gitu aja. Ini harus berputar kembali. Saya harus pakai ilmu yang saya dapat lagi.
Kuncinya kemajuan negara ini adalah di sumber daya manusia, bukan di sumber daya alam. Sumber daya alam banyak, tetapi kalau SDM-nya tidak mendukung, nggak ada artinya.
Kita, terutama para perempuan yang merupakan pendidik pertama generasi masa depan bangsa, harus menjadi individu yang proaktif dalam mempelajari skill baru dan mengasah skill yang sudah dimiliki untuk membuat diri kita lebih mudah berinovasi dan berjejaring dengan banyak pihak.
Kami di Baking World percaya bahwa perempuan yang berdaya akan memberdayakan generasi penerus bangsa.
Saat itu pandemi sedang naiknya, namun saya bisa membuka usaha gula boga dengan martabak mini manis yang saya ikuti dari bakingworld.id.
Kami ingin memberikan pelatihan fotografi yang berkualitas untuk menciptakan peluang usaha masa depan atau future job.
Saya sebelum ikut pelatihan Kartu Prakerja, pengetahuan tentang penggunaan tata cahaya atau lighting dalam fotografi masih sangat minim. Setelah saya ikut pelatihan, saya jadi tambah referensi, tambah pengetahuan baru tentang penggunaan lighting dalam fotografi.
Sebelum saya ikut pelatihan Kartu Prakerja, saya tidak bisa buat website atau apapun. Setelah saya daftar pelatihan Kartu Prakerja, saya bisa buat website hanya dengan 2 jam.
Siapa kita? Kita bekerja!
Hello everyone, and a very warm welcome to the 61st United Nations Commission for Social Development side event organized by the Coordinating Ministry for Economic Affairs of the Republic of Indonesia in collaboration with UNESCO Institute for Lifelong Learning and UN Women. The subject that will be presented in our webinar today is bringing 16.4 million people closer to full and productive employment and decent work using digital technology. I'm Alin Bratmaja, and it is a great pleasure for me to meet all of you. I will be your host in this webinar. Besides through Zoom webinar, you can also watch this event on YouTube channel of Perekonomian RI and Kartu Prakerja. This webinar provides the Indonesia and American Sign Language interpreter. Please click the interpreter feature on your Zoom and choose English or Indonesia to listen to the webinar in English version or Bahasa Indonesia. And also, we provide e-certificate for role of Zoom audience. Ladies and gentlemen, we are very honored for the opportunity of having the Coordinating Minister for Economic Affairs of the Republic of Indonesia, Mr. Erlangga Hartarto. His Excellency Erlangga Hartarto completed his Master of Management Technology in Melbourne Business School of University of Melbourne, Australia. He has received several awards, including from the President of the Republic of Indonesia Award, Bintang Mahaputra Adipradana in 2020, and a Doctor Honoris Causa in Development Policy from KDI School of Public Policy and Management, South Korea in 2019. Mr. Erlangga Hartarto will give an opening remarks for our session tonight. Mr. Erlangga Hartarto, the floor is yours.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Very good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Om Swastiastu, Namo Buddhaya, Salam Kebajikan. First of all, I would like to offer my congratulations to the UN 61st Commission for Social Development Committee for organizing such an important event to advance social development in this world. Thank you for giving the Government of Indonesia the opportunity to organize this side event. Second, I would like to thank Dr. David Achor Rena, Director of UNESCO Institute for Lifelong Learning, Dr. Cecilia Tinonin of UN Women, and all of the speakers for your continued support and valuable contribution. To all of you that are here today with us, thank you for giving us your time and sharing your thought in this discussion. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, adult learning and education was often regarded as an auxiliary or even a completely disconnected system from our education system. However, there is still a gap between the skills obtained from education system and the skills needed by the industry. Then not all workers are able to adapt quickly in newly disrupted working world. Lastly, people in the 21st century have higher life expectancy. The existence of ALA as a common good is very much needed. We cannot just hand over the ALA completely to market mechanism. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, for scale this large like in Indonesia, we obviously need use digital technology and have partnership with many parties such as university, private trainings, NGOs, business association, and we need thousands of good training program in our ecosystem in order to be able to give choices to the people who come from many different backgrounds. The government came up with the ideas of Prakerja program. Indonesia Prakerja program is humanitarian mission with empowerment involving education, employment, and entrepreneurship. Prakerja, the participants can choose to learn English, Python negotiation, or even how to run a pet salon. In Prakerja, every participant can register, choose training, and pick bank or e-wallet account to receive the cash incentive. Bottom-up or on-demand approach is used to ensure only motivated individuals join the program. As a result, from the beginning of 2020 to 2022, more than 16.4 million people from all regions and cities in Indonesia participated in this program. 51% of them are women and 3% people with disabilities. Of those unemployment, a third of them are now employed either as small business owner or employees. Ladies and gentlemen, Prakerja requires policy that includes funding and technology, and also it creates radical change. Indonesia Prakerja is an institutional experiment that has successfully inspired other programs and industries. This program is not only effective in delivering good results, but also did more cost-efficient program, and this is very important since every country has a limit to their budget. Prakerja, we do impact evaluation and estimate our return on training investment. Fortunately, with digital technology training, this can be done online, making it more affordable, convenient, with equal quality. Digital technology, the learning can be done at home, making it easier for women and people with disability to participate. And digital technology also enables small business to expand their market and grow. We want our brothers and sisters all over Indonesia to be able to catch up, reduce inequality by giving equal access to skilling, reskilling, and upskilling using the Kartu Prakerja program. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, despite its rosy image, similar to other reform or innovation, Prakerja transfers a step road. Strong commitment was needed to reach this point. Although much have been achieved, there are many challenges still lie ahead. Prakerja mission has just begun. This mission, I believe, to never ending because the need of lifelong learning exists as long as people and humanity exist. Therefore, I am reaching out to you to act together and collaborate to help every human being in this world so they can live their life fully and optimal in this world. In this mission, the Government of Indonesia, in collaboration with UNESCO Institute for Lifelong Learning and UN Women, humbly organized this event to open the discussion, share our experience and lesson learned. I wish you a fruitful and enjoyable discussion. Thank you. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you very much, Mr. Erlangga Hartarto, for your remarks. Moving forward, ladies and gentlemen, in today's session, we will discuss on how digital technology breakthrough plays a significant role on productive employment to achieve meaningful economic growth and help to improve living standards of individuals, families, and communities. There are needs to make efforts in many countries to create employment and decent works to help people to adapt and improve their skill in this changing work environment. Indonesia has developed Kartu Prakerja program as the pioneer of digital transformation on public service that provides the Indonesia's workforce with skilling, reskilling, and upskilling opportunities. Since first release in the 11th of April 2020, Kartu Prakerja has provided benefits to 16.4 million people from all regions in Indonesia. We will find more in this session about the importance on how innovation and the good practices in adult learning and education, such as in Kartu Prakerja program, leads to a full and productive employment. It helps people to strengthen their resilience during a difficult time and simultaneously increase their contribution to economic development. Ladies and gentlemen, for our next session, we will have a very interesting talk with our honorable speakers and also our moderator. It is a great pleasure for me to introduce our speakers and moderator today who are going to share with us their valuable insights regarding our topic. Please welcome our first speaker, Mr. David Echuarina, Director, UNESCO Institute for Lifelong Learning. Previously, Mr. David Echuarina was the Director of the Division for Policies and Lifelong Learning Systems at UNESCO. Prior to that, he spent many years at the UNESCO International Institute for Educational Planning in the fields of educational planning, lifelong learning, technical and vocational education, and higher education. Mr. Echuarina also served as chargé de mission at the National Agency for Lifelong Education of the French Ministry of Education. He holds a doctorate in economics from the University of Paris, Panthéon-Sorbonne. And for our second speaker, we have Ms. Cecilia Tinanin, Statistics Specialist, UN Women Regional Office for Asia and the Pacific. At the UN Women Regional Office for Asia and the Pacific, Ms. Tinanin is responsible for supporting the implementation of the UN Women Gender Statistic Flagship Program, Women Count in the region. Previously, she served as Project Technical Officer in the Labor Force Methodology Unit at the ILO, as Research Analyst at UNCTAD and UNESCO. She holds a PhD in Agricultural Economics and Statistics with a distinction from the University of Bologna, with academic visiting positions at the University of Oxford and Jawaharlal Nehru University in New Delhi. And we also have Ms. Deni Puspa Purbasari, Executive Director, Project Management Office of Kartu Prakerja. Madam Dani has experience as Deputy for the Research and Development of Strategic Economic Issues at the Executive Office of the President of the Republic of Indonesia. She also has been a lecturer at the Faculty of Economics and Business, University of Gadjah Mada, and she already finished her PhD in Economics at University of Colorado Boulder, USA. And we have Ms. Maria Monica Wiharja, Visiting Fellow, ICS Yusof Ishak Institute, Singapore. In 2017, she was seconded to the Executive Office of the President of the Republic of Indonesia as a senior advisor to the Deputy Chief Staff in charge of strategic economic issues. From 2012 to 2014, she represented Indonesia at the Think 20 meetings at the Los Cabos, St. Petersburg, and Brisbane G20 Summit. She holds a PhD in Regional Science from Cornell University. And last but not least, we have Mr. Elan Satriawan, Chief of Policy Working Group, the National Team for the Acceleration of Poverty Reduction, or widely known as the TNP2K. Prior to joining TNP2K, he was Senior Researcher at Jamil Poverty Action Lab, J-PAL MIT, and had worked as consultant for the World Bank and ASEAN Development Bank. He is also an associate professor at Department of Economics of Gadjah Mada University. He has an extensive experience in research on development, microeconomics, anti-poverty and social programs, and poverty-related issues including health and education. He has a PhD from Michigan State University. And our moderator for today's discussion, Ms. Bimbika Sijapati Basnet, Head of Equality, Disability and Social Inclusion at Prospera. Prior to joining Prospera, she was a scientist at Center for International Forestry Research for almost 6 years, since 2013. She holds Bachelor of Arts in Economics and Environmental Issues at Macalester College and also MSc and PhD in Development Studies from the London School of Economics and Political Science. Before we start our discussion, we will watch a short video documentary from Kartu Prakerja beneficiaries.
Yang namanya perempuan, walaupun jadi ibu rumah tangga ataupun sebagainya, itu harus punya keahlian ya. Perkenalkan, nama saya Lydia Astriana, saya berasal dari Pontianak, saya tinggal di Kota Baru, Jalan Danau Sentarum, saya kuliah di Universitas Tanjung Pura. Pertama itu saya ambil itu adalah English learning, menjadi tour guide dalam 3 jam, habis itu bisnis untuk Mandarin, habis itu saya belajar lagi tentang AI. Yang namanya perempuan, walaupun jadi ibu rumah tangga ataupun sebagainya, itu harus punya keahlian ya. Kan banyak orang bilang itu percuma pendidikan tinggi tapi ujung-ujungnya jadi ibu rumah tangga. Sedangkan jadi ibu rumah tangga itu kan nggak semudah itu gitu loh, membimbing dan punya prestasi, punya kemampuan gitu loh, punya edukasi yang bagus gitu untuk anak-anak nanti gitu loh. Nah, saya gunakan uang itu untuk beli printer dan juga saya untuk materi-materi mengajar bahasa Inggris itu saya print out gitu untuk mengajar anak-anak les saya gitu. Di saat ada sounding tentang pekerjaan seperti itu, kita pergunakan baik sertifikat kita untuk melamar gitu. Kalau dilihat-lihat sama HRD kan, oh ini anak pernah ikut pelatihan tour guide, terus dia juga pengalaman jadi tour guide sekian tahun gitu. Nah gitu.
Kartu Prakerja is a timely measure that demonstrates Indonesia's commitment to achieving the SDGs Sustainable Development Goals despite the impact of the pandemic.
And now I will give the screen to our moderator to lead the presentation and discussion session with our speakers. Ms. Bimbika Sijapati Basnet, the screen is yours.
Thank you so much, Mr. Alvin. It is a great pleasure for me to be here with you all. As Ms. Alvin has shared, we have an excellent lineup of speakers. We welcome the audience to participate in the discussion, so please do share your questions in the Q&A column. Please let us know whom your question is addressed to as well. So for our first speaker, please join me in welcoming Mr. David Achoruene, Director of UNESCO Institute for Lifelong Learning. Mr. David, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thanks for the introduction. First of all, I would like to thank Indonesia, the Coordinating Ministry for Economic Affairs, and the Honorable Erlangga Hartarto for inviting UIL to join Indonesia in organizing this event, and also, of course, Kartu Prakerja. We are glad also to team up with UN Women, inclusion and gender equality being an important concern and area for policy attention when developing responses to facilitate access to the labor market and to decent jobs. The scale of the experience that Kartu Prakerja is illustrating is really impressive. We heard already a few words about the achievements of the program, and I would like in my presentation to reflect how this experience on really leveraging digital transformation for facilitating on a large scale the integration on the labor market illustrates a broader potential for really developing lifelong learning policies as a way not only to promote education, but as a way also to facilitate social development. And this is what I'm going to do in my presentation. Next, please. Next. I want to start, in fact, and to end also with the question of inclusion and equity. I mean, this is a very important element when talking about lifelong learning and lifelong learning policies, because there is ample evidence from the experience of countries that when promoting lifelong learning policies, there is often a gap and an increasing, level of inequalities between different groups, and in particular in terms of gender. And this is reflected to some extent in the data which is presented on the screen now, which comes from the Global Report on Adult Learning and Education, a report which is produced by UL on behalf of UNESCO, which shows that that report that was published last year showed that there was about 57 countries in the world where the participation of women in adult education had increased since 2018. So that was indeed a progress, but we are still in a situation where disparities of access and achievements are very huge between men and women. As you can see, 2/3 of the illiterate population in the world are actually women. And although, the majority of women in the world now use mobile internet, it's still, in terms of proportion, a much smaller part of the total population which is using mobile internet. So men do have much greater access to this potential, to this technology than women. So there are still wide disparities, and of course this has implications on the design and implementation of lifelong learning policies. Next, please. I'd like just to give you, in a nutshell, a few points about what is emerging from the international experience, in particular if we look at ASEAN countries. Indeed, we've seen that since 2015 and the adoption of the SDGs, a number of countries in the regions have actually embarked in developing comprehensive, integrated lifelong learning policies. And there are some commonalities in those policies. One is this concept of flexible learning pathways, and I will get back to that later, but this is a very important principle, flexibility, how to ensure that there are different ways of accessing the education and training system. There is also a very, in a number of countries, a lot of focus on gender, and this is due to this gap that I just mentioned in my introduction. We also see an emphasis on intersectoral policies for lifelong learning, and here again, I think that the experience of Indonesia, with the role that plays the coordinating ministry, is an excellent illustration of how a country can go about establishing this intersectoral approach and holistic approach towards lifelong learning. A few factors are actually also shaping lifelong learning policies, in particular demographic change. We heard that in the video. In the case of Indonesia, aging is already there in many countries in the region, and more recently we've seen also that lifelong learning has to be an instrument to contribute to climate action. It becomes really a reality, a priority for all countries. Next, please. Just one word on a policy tool that proved to be a very powerful instrument to facilitate access and re-entry into learning, but also into the labor market, is the recognition, validation, and accreditation. Recognition of prior learning in particular has been powerful instruments to really accelerate the access of different and new categories of population into the education and training system, but also a powerful instrument to recognize the skills that people already have, and therefore be in a better position to see how those existing skills can be used to actually address new challenges. And I want to emphasize this point also, that responding to the challenges of Industry 0.0 is not only about new skills, but it's also about how to use and mobilize already existing skills, and RVA are a very important and powerful instrument to do that. Next, please. The concept of flexible learning pathway, which I referred to when I spoke about the experience in the countries, is very important. It actually requires to reform and revisit the way formal education institutions operate, so that they become also open institutions for learning, open to different categories of learners, but also how do we mobilize other institutions in the non-formal education sphere, in particular cultural institutions such as libraries, such as museums, and in Asia in particular, community learning centers. So building bridges between the formal and non-formal education is a key challenge, but also a key principle for building those learning pathways. Next, please. Here, I'd like just to say a few words about this publication that was recently issued by the UNESCO Institute for Lifelong Learning, which is about this concept of a culture of building, embracing a culture of lifelong learning. So when we're talking about promoting lifelong learning, it's not only about instruments, it's not only about policies, it's also about changing the culture of institutions, in particular, changing the culture of stakeholders, including employers, to look at the landscape for human resources development and for education and training in a different way, in a much more open way, in a much more flexible way. And technology is one of the key instruments actually to contribute to this change. And this is what we're going to discuss further based on the experience of Kartu Prakerja. Please, next slide. So technology is a game changer, or can it be a game changer? I think that we've seen with COVID-19 that this is already the case. We've seen tremendous changes. We've seen how platforms are becoming maybe the new classroom in the world, and therefore redefining the parameters for actually reflecting on how to develop access to knowledge, how to develop access to learning, but also what is the role of the learner and how the learner can actually be an agent of his or her own, development, including professional development. And again, I think that what we are seeing in Indonesia with Kartu Prakerja is a very strong illustration of this. To conclude, I would like just to make a last point again on the issue of gender equality and gender equity. Please, the last point, just to say that what we are saying in terms of inequality of access, including regarding the digital gap, is linked to a broader issue of gender inequalities, which require also to tackle it through, I would say, a revised and enhanced concept of citizenship. And citizenship education is a very important instrument to achieve this goal. And you see here in this picture on this graph, what is the status today in terms of including gender equality in existing citizenship education program. So to close, I would just like to stress 5 points: the importance of flexible learning pathways, the importance of tools such as recognition, validation, and accreditation of learning, the articulation between working and learning, enhanced and facilitated by technology, the need to build learning ecosystems, and finally, to pay attention to inequalities, to inclusion, and in particular, gender equality. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, Mr. David, for shedding light on the importance of investing in inclusive lifelong learning opportunities to facilitate education and also social development. And it's also great to hear about, some of the solutions that you propose, including digital innovations for adult learners, workplace learners, and for citizens as well. So please let me introduce our next speaker, Ms. Cecilia Tinonen, Statistics Specialist, UN Women Regional Office for Asia and the Pacific. Ms. Tinonen, the screen is yours. Thank you.
Thank you so much, dear Bimbika. A very good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all participants, and thank you so much for taking the time to attend this event. Today, I will present a research that we conducted in partnership with UN Lab Jakarta, BPS, the National Statistical Office of Indonesia, and in collaboration also with Gojek, which is a digital labor platform with a large market share in Indonesia. We wanted in this research to understand the role of digitalization as a coping strategy during COVID-19, especially for women-owned and men-owned micro and small businesses in Indonesia. Next slide, please. But now we know that COVID triggered a change in the world of work. And most specifically, we know that this change has been seeing women at a disadvantage because more women than men since the start of COVID-19 moved from paid employment to unpaid domestic and care work as main economic activity without any additional income generating activities or secondary job. The graph that you see in the slide shows the result from rapid gender assessment surveys conducted by UN Women in partnership with national stakeholders in countries in the region, Asia and Pacific. Indonesia is the 4th country from the left. And you may see, hopefully, the horizontal symbols represent the rate of employment and unpaid caregivers as main economic activity prior to COVID-19, whereas the bars, the vertical bars, represent the corresponding level during COVID-19. And I think you can see visually it's quite clear that there has been this radical and drastic shift from paid employment to unpaid domestic and care work. And this result is obvious in all countries where we conducted this survey. Why am I saying this? Because while UN Women obviously advocates for increased attention on the care economy at the center of recovery programs, we also wanted really to unpack what was going on in the labor market with a specific focus on those more vulnerable segments, such as one working in micro and small businesses, obviously with gender lens, and see the differences between women-owned micro and small businesses versus men-owned micro and small businesses. Next slide, please. And we know that Indonesia, 90% of the workforce in Indonesia actually is engaged in micro small businesses. And thanks to the data provided by BPS, the National Statistical Office of Indonesia, we know that during COVID-19 pandemic, women-owned micro and small businesses were more likely to actually leverage digitalization to sell their product online, despite the fact that more men-owned micro and small businesses. You will see in the second graph in the bottom that there is also a size effect. So slightly bigger businesses with, for instance, a higher number of employees are the one most likely to sell online through internet. And next slide, please. When we looked also, for instance, at the big data provided by Gojek, we realized immediately there was an upsurge in registration. So between September and March and September 2019 and March and September 2020, Gojek reveals that Gobits, which is the platform engaged with the food and beverages sector, actually saw a 31% increase in new registers. And among those, 49% actually use the platform every day. So COVID-19 has prompted micro and small businesses to go digital, but when we surveyed the businesses through the Gobits platform, we also pretty soon realized that they don't rely only on one platform, such as, for instance, Gobits in this case, but they do rely on a multitude of platforms, meaning that they're not economically dependent only on one singular digital labor platforms, but within digitalization, they really rely on different marketplace, digital labor platforms, social media, to really increase their client portfolio. Next slide, please. When we looked at the effect of digitalization and participating in a digital labor platform to cope with COVID-19 pandemic, we definitely saw that obviously it was a clear coping strategy for many, but who benefited the most were actually women-owned macro and small businesses, with younger businesses being actually the one benefiting the most in terms of expansion. So as you see in the graph, those micro small businesses that were operating for less than 1 year were the one that declared that the platform helped expand their businesses, whereas those that were operating in the market for more than 3 years at the time where we conducted the survey noted that the platform helped them survive during the pandemic. Next slide, please. And this is particularly important because we ask also, beside digitalization, what are additional coping strategies that you may have used to cope, for instance, with the lockdown regulations or the disruptions in labor markets that COVID-19 pandemic has obviously introduced, as we know by now. And we found that whereas man-owned micro and small businesses were relying on a wide variety of coping strategies, such as, for instance, applying for loan or asking household members to help in the family or firing workers, women actually in great majority replied that they didn't have any additional coping strategy. So they were reliant very much so on the digital platform to sell their product. The second source of coping strategy for women-owned micro and small businesses was actually changing the scope of work. Whereas, as I said, for men, there was a much wider menu of options in terms of coping strategy. Next slide, please. It must be underlined, however, that whether a digital platform can be helpful for business survival depends on a number of external factors that are particularly important in context of necessity micro and small businesses. Necessity micro small businesses, they don't have a definition in statistics, but conceptually are micro and small businesses smaller in size, most likely informal, unregistered, where the motivation of creating the business is really linked to creating household income to meet the basic needs of the household. And through qualitative in-depth interviews conducted by UN Lab Jakarta, actually external factors were smartphone ownership, obviously, but also technological facilitators, such as, for instance, a young household member that could help older household member navigating the digital space, register on the platform, and teach the parents basically how the platform works. Obviously, business location, urban areas was also an important external factor. Next slide, please. We also looked at the social stimulus programs, and we see that informal businesses benefited the most by social protection, especially, for instance, Kartu Prakerja. So we are actually very pleased to share this result with all of you. Next slide, which is gonna take me to conclusions. Instead of summarizing the key point, I just would like to highlight some important point for next steps when it comes to digitalization. One, obviously, is to fill the digital gender divide. In 2022, still 2.8 billion people did not have access to the internet, with women, especially women in older age group, at a disadvantage. There is a strong need, as my colleague David at UNESCO said, to really tackle the issue of digital skills gaps in the education sector. We know that by now women are less likely to achieve completion in education in science and technology disciplines, and we need to remind ourselves that this has an effect also on leadership, those that will be sitting and taking decision in these sectors. So there is really a need to tackle these gaps, and also to increase, if I may say, research and evidence on the role of digital labor platforms in promoting gender equality. Until now, the literature available is very much skewed toward sectors that are likely to attract male workforce. So there is a real need to ensure that digitalization is a promoter to decent work for women as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Cecilia. And it is indeed really encouraging to hear how many women-owned businesses benefited from digital technology during the pandemic, when, you know, they also saw so much increase in both their paid and unpaid workload. Your point about the need to understand the role of digital labor platforms serves as a really great transition to our next speakers. So now let us welcome our next speaker, Ms. Denny Puspapurbasari, the Executive Director of Project Management Office of Kartu Prakerja. Over to you, Ms. Denny.
Thank you, Bimbika. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, ladies and gentlemen. So thank you so much for having me here to share the experience of Kartu Prakerja program. So I would like to share with you the Indonesia Digital Transformation for Large-Scale Development Program called Kartu Prakerja. So for the first slide, please. Yes, so the question here is that why do Indonesia or other countries need a large-scale skill development program like Prakerja? So ladies and gentlemen, disruptions can be anywhere, anytime, from technology, climate change, demographic change, geopolitics, and so on. So the issues here is that their impacts are enormous and are asymmetric among members of society. And people's ability to adapt are different. So providing lifelong learning in terms of skilling, reskilling, and upskilling is very important, such that people can make choices, have skills, confident, able to solve their problems, and self-reliant. So we see here lifelong learning or adult learning and education is actually a common good. So Indonesia is a large archipelagic country with an income per capita of around $4,000 US. And the problem here is that in 2019, there are 24% of our youth not in employment, education, nor training. And moreover, Statistics Indonesia showed that in 2019, 90% of Indonesian workforce, approximately 120 million people, never attended any vocational trainings. The main reasons, number one, lack of money. Number two, lack of time. Number three, there is no information available that can guide people to select which training they need. The second thing is that what is the benefit of taking the training? So what happened here is that, next slide please. So starting in 2020, Indonesia initiated a large-scale skill development program to tackle such problem. So Kartu Prakerja is essentially a conditional cash transfer program that provides scholarships to the grantees to freely choose online trainings relevant to the current job market available in our e-marketplace partners, as well as social assistance through e-wallet and bank accounts. Because in 2020, pandemic occurred, and some people actually not covered by regular social assistance. So Prakerja transforms itself to be a semi-social assistance program. So from April 2020 to December 2022, there are 16.4 million beneficiaries receive Prakerja. 51% of them are women, 3% people with disabilities, 12% people 50 years old and above, 19% people with elementary school or even less. Next slide, please. So, what is actually the key success of Prakerja? How come Prakerja work that well and able to serve so many people in a very short time? So the first thing is there is a strong mandate supported by institutional breakthrough. So Prakerja is initiated by Mr. President himself in 2019. And then the coordinating minister for economic affairs actually led the job creation committee consisting 14 ministers to work together in order to set up the policy of Prakerja. And then a part of the policymaker, there is the implementer, the project management office that I lead in the last 3 years. So PMO of Kartu Prakerja consisting almost all professionals that have experience in the digital payments, in the startups world, in the legal business, etc. So that's basically the key success of Prakerja. And there is a good coordination between the policy side and in the implementation side. And the commitment of the president is very strong to Prakerja as part of the program of the government to accelerate the achievement of SDG, pillar number 4 and SDG number 8. So this program has been allocated a budget of around 59 trillion rupiah or about 3.9 billion US dollar from 2020 to 2022. Next slide, please. The second recipe of the success of Prakerja is digital technology. But it is not just a digital technology, but digital technology with empathy to the users. What I mean here is that technology by itself cannot guarantee inclusivity. It is human policymakers, implementers who work really hard to make sure that our website, our product, our features actually really serve the users. So you can see here from the look, from the color, from the font, from the figures that we put on the website, and also the words on the language is really tailored toward the users. And then technology also cannot guarantee by itself equity. Equity must be designed in order to make sure people from 17,000 islands actually can access easily the program. So we do randomization with weights and implement batching mechanism in order to give space and time for people all over Indonesia to absorb information and then apply. So that's basically digital technology with empathy to the users. The next slide, please. The second thing is digital ecosystem. Digital technology by itself and government by themselves cannot work for such a large scale. We need to collaborate with many actors. Number one, we need to have a strong collaboration within the government institutions to do identity verifications. That's the block in the left, bottom left. And then after being verified, our participants can select any trainings in the ecosystem in marketplace that you can see in the middle block above Prakerja sign over there. There are 6 marketplace available, Tokopedia, Bukalapak, and so on, that basically give detailed information for each training, the duration, the price, ratings, information, what you get, even the trainings institution and also the instructors. So people can select any trainings in the ecosystem, and the trainings in the Prakerja has been assessed carefully by the universities and NGO that collaborate with us. And we also invite business members in order to check the modules or the curriculum of our trainings. So basically, each participant or training providers in Prakerja ecosystem compete to each other in price, quality, and services. After the completion of the training, then each participant can get some cash incentive. They can select banks or fintech that is available in the ecosystem as the account disbursement. So we implement the G2P 3.0 that is consumer-centric and really support financial inclusion. Lastly, after participants completed their trainings, then they can see right away in their personal dashboard any jobs, vacancies available and relevant with the trainings that they just completed. Because we have integrated with 4 largest job portals in the market, namely JobStreet, Top Career, Jobs ID, and Career.com. So this ecosystem, again, is not automatically there. ICT by itself cannot basically provide efficiency of this ecosystem. It has to be intentionally designed to make sure that the process from one step to another runs smoothly. Next slide, please. So what is actually the takeaway from the experience of Prakerja? The key success of Prakerja, number 1, is institutional setup. Here we see the political commitment, the mandate is very important, and the division of labor and coordination between the policy side and the operational side is very strong. The second recipe is there is partnership among many actors to support the ecosystem in order to bring the most value to our customers, to our users. The third one is the utilization of cloud computing technology as the backbone to serve people. And then the fourth one, of course, budget commitment, and not only budget itself, but the authority to the usage or the utilization of the budget is actually in the hand of the PMO. There is no bureaucracy whatsoever in allocating the budget. And then the last one, in Prakerja, voice and choice are given to our users. We use ratings, reviews, surveys, and many contact center lines in order to listen the voice of our users and then take that inputs to make correction and continuous improvements. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Deni Puspapurbasari. Digital technology with empathy to the users. Thank you for giving us an insider view into such a groundbreaking large-scale skills development program. So our next speaker is Ms. Maria Monica Wiharja, visiting fellow at ICS Yusof Ishak Institute, Singapore. Over to you, Ms. Maria.
Thank you, Bimbimka. And good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. I also would like to thank our organizers for inviting me to this very important webinar among our very distinguished speakers. So today I'm going to talk about how Indonesia could prepare its workforce for a fast changing world. Next. So in the past 2 decades, Indonesia is not a story of jobless growth. In fact, Indonesia has been able to create on average about 2 million jobs every year, but it is a story of low productivity job growth. You can see from the graph on the slide that most jobs are basically clustered in sectors with low productivity, such as agriculture, wholesale retail trade, hotels, restaurants, community, personal, and other elementary services. Productivity growth has not been sufficient to unlock the backlog of almost half of Indonesians stuck in aspiring middle class status. Next. Next, please. And COVID-19 pandemic further challenged the transition to better quality jobs. Unemployment rate rose to the highest level since 2009 in 2020, and the share of good quality middle class jobs declined by about 5.2 percentage points. The pandemic also shifted people from higher quality employment to lower quality employment, with the share of wage employees declining by 5 percentage points just within 1 year. And the pandemic potentially left a scarring effect on the 7 million newly graduate youth. As you can see from the graph on the left-hand side, that newly graduate youths who become idle, who are not in education, employment, nor training, have increased in 2020. Although some youth have recovered to employment in 2021, but some types of youth have not. For example, male youth and also youth with higher educational level. And also during the pandemic, women entered as added workers, although into low quality jobs in sectors with low entry barriers, such as trade and services. Next slide. As you know, as our previous speakers have shown, that digital transformation helps in the short run. For example, close to 80% of digital merchants surveyed in the World Bank and Shopee COVID-19 Digital Merchants Survey shows that this 80% of digital merchants kept their business open throughout 2020, compared to only less than 4 out of 10 firms that had never closed their business. And as you can see from the graph on the right-hand side, that by August 2021, 71% of firms surveyed have actually used digital technologies in their operation, compared to only 41% of firms in June 2020. And the same survey also shows that investment in digital equipment and or software was positively correlated with higher sales. Next slide, please. However, digital transformation poses new challenges in the medium and long term. The first challenge is that we show evidence that there is skill bias technological change in Indonesia. We show that skills premia increase at the onset of technological advancement. A World Bank study shows that the incremental benefits from internet penetration are larger for more educated workers, further widening skills premia between less and more educated workers. However, little is known about how to actually attenuate the impacts of skill bias technological change. So our study actually tries to look at this aspect of skills bias technological change. And the second challenge posed by digital transformation is task bias technological change. Unlike skill bias technological change, task bias technological change theory suggests that low-skilled jobs are not necessarily replaced by technologies, but routine jobs are. And these jobs are likely to be middle-skilled jobs, which in turn may create job polarization. And the third challenge posed by digital transformation is the heterogeneous impacts of digital investment on labor market. So there are actually losers and winners from new digital investment in Indonesia. Next slide, please. So as already mentioned, that in Indonesia, there's evidence of skill bias technological change since the onset of internet penetration in Indonesia. Internet penetration has exacerbated the education or skills premium, with additional return from internet penetration being higher for more educated workers. As you can see in the table on the third column, that the additional average return of 1 percentage point increase in internet penetration in districts in Indonesia is actually higher for more educated workers. However, as you can see from the fourth column on the table, that certified trainings could actually reduce the skill bias technological change. Next slide, please. And the second challenge posed by digital transformation is a task bias technological change. We show in our study that starting in 2006, there has been a job polarization, where there's a decrease in the shares of middle-skilled occupations and an increase in the shares of high-skilled and low-skilled occupation. And we studied the causes of this job polarization, and we show that the more affordable technology may be benefiting high-skilled occupation, but it could actually substitute middle-skilled occupation, especially clerical and sales occupations. Moreover, structural changes in sectoral employment during the commodity boom, where we also witnessed premature deindustrialization and tertiarizations of sectoral employment, may contribute to job polarization, which may partly explain the significant increase in inequality during that period. Next slide, please. As you can see from the graph on the right-hand side, that digital task content has been increasing in Indonesia. Moreover, we show that digital task content is a complement to non-routine cognitive analytical, non-routine cognitive interpersonal, and routine cognitive, but is a substitute to routine manual and non-routine manual physical task content of jobs. And using a multivariate regression, we find that females are more likely to work in occupation with digital task contents relative to male. And digital task content of jobs has the highest return compared to other task content, and the return has been increasing trend across years. Moreover, higher returns to digital task content are found for more vulnerable workers such as female, rural, older, and less educated workers. Next slide, please. We also study the impacts of digital investment on the labor market. We find that different digital subsectors such as digital manufacturing, digital trade, digital services have different impacts on the labor market. For example, digital manufacturing has negative employment impacts on blue-collar workers, who are mostly production workers. Digital trade has negative employment impacts on white-collar but low-skilled workers, such as clerical and sales workers. While digital investment does not generally favor youth in terms of creating more jobs, but digital manufacturing and digital investment create more jobs for youth, but with tertiary education. Next slide, please. Now I'm going to draw some findings from the World Bank Shopee COVID-19 Digital Merchant Survey that we conducted in 2021 and 2022. We find that among 1 in 5 merchants received government assistance, and around 2/3 of them receive it via cash transfers. And merchants who receive cash transfers largely receive it via Kartu Prakerja and government's financial assistance for micro enterprises, or what is called Banpres. There was no significant difference in receiving Kartu Prakerja received between female and male merchants. But female merchants were more likely to allocate their cash assistance on savings compared to male merchants. Next slide, please. When we ask digital merchants their top 3 business support programs that they most desired, there's no difference between the answers between female and male merchants, and the answers are digital knowledge, skills, and training, sales and marketing, and cheaper and reliable logistics. Next slide. In our second round of the survey, we find that there are 3 main constraints to perform better on e-commerce among digital merchants. The first one is time constraint. We find that the biggest challenge to time constraints is that many of these digital merchants actually have other paid work. But the most binding constraints, especially among female merchants, is caring for children. And the second main constraint found among digital merchants is financing issues. 25% of digital merchants actually take loans. And interestingly, the most popular loans that are taken by digital merchants is digital loans. When we ask merchants who did not take digital loans why they did not take digital loans, the answers is because of high cost of borrowing and the lack of awareness and understanding about digital loan products. And the third main constraint is business knowledge and a lack of business knowledge and digital skills. Next slide, please. So for policy recommendation, we recommend that the government could continue to build pathways to higher productivity and higher productivity middle-class jobs now for the long run. In times of crisis such as the pandemic, the government could roll out short-term job relief measures such as liquidity supports to firms linked to worker retention targets and assistance to vulnerable workers, including informal workers. And in the medium term, when signs of recoveries are found, then job relief measures could shift to job recovery measures that could include supports to create jobs. And our studies on digital transformation shows that digital transformation necessitates more inclusive educational policies, certified development, development on certified trainings, and teaching skills complementing digital tasks such as cognitive, analytical, and interpersonal skills, and lifelong learning through continuous upskilling and reskilling, including through companies promoting upskilling and reskilling among their workers, micro-credential certifications, and public-private partnership. Specifically for digital merchants, we recommend to support access to affordable and high-quality childcare, especially for female digital merchants, and to improve digital and financial literacy for better understanding of both the risk and the benefits as well as terms, and to target programs to improve business knowledge and skills. So I would like to conclude that nobody should stop learning because the world never stops teaching. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Monica Viharja, for your presentation, for sharing the broader context in which the Kartu Prakerja program was introduced. I noted distress rise in women's participation and scarring effects as some on young job seekers as some of the key effects. And thanks also for pointing out the winners and losers of digital investment, and your point about the need to build pathways to high productivity and middle-class jobs for continuous learning is really valid. So please allow me to invite our next speaker, Mr. Elan Satriawan, who's the Chief of Policy Working Group, the National Team for Acceleration of Poverty Reduction, TNP2K. Mr. Elan, the screen is yours.
Thank you, Bimbika. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. First of all, I'd like to thank for the organizer to invite me to share basically my experience working with collaborating with Ibu Deni and the PMO in evaluating the effectiveness of Indonesia Kartu Prakerja. Next. So now everyone, I think, aware that this is perhaps among the flagship program that only going into like 3 years, but I think have achieved a very significant accomplishment. I think I'm fortunate to work with since the beginning, since the preparation of the Prakerja. Before the program was launched in early 2020, I worked with Ibu Deni and then also with some colleagues preparing the designs of the program. And one important part of the program is that we design is actually the evaluation system consisting the evaluation framework, the data that we're going to use, the methods, and how the evidence we generate from the evaluation would be used to improve the programs. And one element of the designs that later on proved to be important when we evaluate the program impacts, Bu Deni already mentioned in her presentation that we decide that for selecting the beneficiary after they pass the initial test, because those that goes through to the next stage after the initial test is always over quota, is done through the lottery, which I think which we know that this is perhaps the most fair to decide the beneficiaries that will receive the programs, and this provide the foundation for the evaluator later on to implement the randomized control trial when evaluation the impact of the programs. Next. So this is the evaluation that I think among the evaluation that we design, working with collaborating with the PMO. So there's a set of the evaluation activities from the rapid survey, beneficiary journey satisfaction, beneficiary tracking, process evaluation, and impact evaluation. And at the beginning, we also decide that there is a data that can be generated by the system. Bu Deni already mentioned about the use of the digital technology for many that apply to the program that already save many information about the applicants, even including those that not goes through or not selected as the beneficiaries. And once the beneficiaries implement, or one beneficiaries finish the training, then they go actually through some evaluation survey. Prakerja also doing some survey through the partners. But in addition to the internal resources, we engage also with the external agencies to utilize to access their data. Prakerja work closely with the National Statistical Agency to access the nationally representative survey, SUSENAS and then SAKRENAS, and it's not just using the existing information, but also piggyback some of the relevant variables, relevant information that is not yet covered by the existing instruments. Prakerja also work closely with some external agencies, JPAL, TNP2K, Presisi, and others to conduct spatial surveys to collect some information that not covered by the existing surveys. Also work with the other government agencies to access some administrative data. Prakerja work closely with the Ministry of Home Affairs to match the data Prakerja with the population administrative database to ensure the uniqueness, but also with the extreme poverty database that contain many information related with the socioeconomic status. And it's not just that, Prakerja mobilize and even invite many think tanks, research institutes, economists to participate doing the evaluation. Because at the I think we aware since the beginning that the evaluation itself should not be conducted internally, but should be done by the independent parties. Next. This is just to give you some ideas that the Prakerja system even already made the Prakerja, the PMO Prakerja as a data producer, a very large, very massive data, very rich one. Bu Deni already mentioned that even they have like the administrative data for the 16.4 million beneficiaries, 14.5 million respondents that respond to the evaluation surveys after they completed the training. Information on the more than 1,000 trainings that digitally recorded since 2022, and also collaborate with at least 6 research and think tanks to evaluate the Kartu Prakerja programs. Next. I'd like now to just give you some the summaries from the 3 studies that happen to be collaborated with the NP2K. So first, I think just few months after the Prakerja was launched in April 2022, so we work with PMO Prakerja to conduct the rapid survey, contacting around 6,000 respondents, basically to have a sense on the beneficiaries' journey experience, their satisfaction, their perception on the Prakerja, the training, the use of the option of the training, and so on. And even since the beginning, we found a very positive results that 93% of the respondents agree that Kartu Prakerja training is the match actually with their competency, with what they need. 94% agree that the training option are sufficiently varied, and 75% they're willing actually to take more online training, again, even without the government pay for them. And also the use of the incentive. Bu Deni mentioned that in the beginning, the government decided, because the pandemic actually would give the negative effect, give the negative effect for many that not necessarily receive the program, that not necessarily receive the social assistance from the government, because they are not in the database of the government. So they receive, in addition, the training. So they receive actually the social assistance, the cash assistance. And we asked how they use the cash incentive. and majority of them actually they use their cash incentive for the daily need, something that we think it's the right use for that cash assistance. Some of them to use the cash assistance for the business capital and as well as for the working capital. Next. Then utilizing that randomizing the selection of the beneficiaries, we use that features to conduct the evaluation of the Kartu Prakerja. We try to identify utilizing that the fact that and comparing between those that not selected by the system and those that selected by the system, and because this is random, so we believe that comparing between them, comparing the outcome between them will conclude actually the impact of the prakerja. So we conduct the online survey, and we have the response from about 750 respondents on the 2021, and we found the very positive impact, showing that Kartu Prakerja is actually improve some of the employment outcomes. Kartu Prakerja increase the likelihood of the beneficiaries to use the training certificate when they apply for the jobs. Also, Kartu Prakerja helps the beneficiaries to start the new jobs, including to start the new business, and increase the likelihood to own the business. We also find the impact the Kartu Prakerja on the to promote the financial inclusion, particularly on the increase of the e-wallet ownership, and also increase in the likelihood of the online purchase with e-wallet. And I think one also important result that Kartu Prakerja increase the labor income among those that receive the training. Next. So this is the last survey that the latest survey that we conduct collaborate with Prakerja and the World Banks, particularly focusing on the feature of the Prakerja as the digital-based multi-channel G2P payments. So we conduct a survey to around 1,000 respondents. And we found that 98% of the beneficiaries did not experience any difficulty in cashing out the incentive. I should mention that Prakerja is the first program that allow the beneficiaries to use their own bank account. If they have the BNI, then the Prakerja will pay through BNI. If they have the account, already have the account through other bank, then Prakerja will transfer the benefit through that account. Also, we found that 85% of the beneficiaries spend less time in cashing out the incentive, and then 59% of the beneficiaries opening first e-wallet and bank account users for Prakerja. So meaning that so this is those beneficiaries that never have the bank account and then e-wallet before. Also, among the Kartu Prakerja beneficiaries, we found that 96% of the beneficiaries are satisfied with their first training purchase, and 96.4% also are satisfied with the speed of the incentive disbursement. So I think with that summary, we found that that in only the 3 years of the program since its launch, I think there's so many there are so many that have already been achieved by the Prakerja. Of course there's some rooms for PMO to improve the programs, but the evaluation that we conduct so far, I think give some notes to the Prakerja that these programs have achieved a lot. I stop there, Bimbika, and then back to you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Elan Satriwan. Your presentation was very encouraging because it definitely highlights the success of the program, but it also gives us insights into the role that data and evidence can play in program design, evaluation, and decision-making. And I'm sure there are many people in here among the audience who are policymakers or independent parties, and they've really appreciated you taking the time to share both the methods and findings. Thank you again. And as I'm sure all of you will agree, I've certainly learned so much from our fabulous lineup of speakers. I'm glad we have time to engage with our speakers during our Q&A session as well. And the organizers have already informed me that we've received quite a few questions. So let me begin by asking the first to three of our speakers in order: Ibu Deni, Mr. Elan, and Ms. Monica. So the question to you is, technological change and COVID-19 has led to unprecedented disruptions to employment, education, and public services the world over, as you all also shared during your presentation, and that Kartu Prakerja is a great example of how governments can embrace digital technology to transform the design and delivery of public services. So in your opinion, which aspects of the Kartu Prakerja program may be useful for other government programs interested to also adopt digital technology? If I may have a response from Ms. Deni first. Over to you, Ms. Deni.
This is a very nice question. As I mentioned, having ICT by itself is not sufficient. We have to be able to select and then utilize and make sure that we work in a detail in order to make sure that the user experience is really, really well. So number one, please use cloud computing technology because it allows us to work in efficiency, at scale, and we will gain a lot of flexibility. Number two, make sure that you are ready to capture the data of the business process, the data of the user journey. Why is that? Because using the data, we can improve our program, our policies, our products, such that the product is getting closer and closer to what our customers need. And third, it is very important to have an integrated ID verification, seamless, smooth, and implement layers of ID verifications or layers of identity verifications. Why is it important? Because again, we want to make sure our program has a mechanism in order to protect from fraudsters. And above all, whatever we do, we need a good support from the leaders that allow the implementer to do their best in order to be sure that technology can be used optimally to serve the people, and make sure that the product that we build is actually solve the pain problems of our customers. So that's my tips in order to adopt digital technology in other government programs. Thank you.
Thank you so much. May I invite Mr. Elan?
Yeah, so for one, in the case of the Prakerja and something that other government program can also learn and adopt, the technology help to outreach better the targeted population. And particularly for a country like Indonesia with archipelago with so many islands, with heterogeneity and the access difficulties, technology address that concern, that constraint, and then provide equal access actually for the people to access the programs. We know that before Prakerja, most of the training program are provided by the government, the public training agencies that only located in the capital of the districts, or even the capital of the province, and definitely not everyone in the province or in the district can access that. When we provide the training actually using the technology, everyone actually can access it. To be honest, to be frankly, I think during the discussion with Ibu Deni when we prepare the program, we have the potential concern that this program can only be accessed by those that from the upper income group because they have the technology. But I think knowing after a year, after 2 years, we know that everyone, even from the remote areas in the Papua, in the Nusa Tenggara, they're among the one that access the programs. Second, I think we have also some lesson learned from the Prakerja, but also from other programs, because the transition from the delivering the benefit of the program is also to using the technology also happen in other programs. And I think using the technology, and particularly using the financial technology, making sure that the beneficiaries receive what they're supposed to receive. In other programs, when we have many issues that the beneficiaries actually not receive what they're supposed to because the benefit of the program delivered in kind, and many actors actually can play on the distribution change. So the amount that received by the beneficiaries in the amount that not supposed they receive, and they also receive on time, relatively on time. Again, concerning Indonesia heterogeneity, the heterogeneity and geography, access in very timing in access and delivering in very timeline is very important, and technology helps to deliver that benefit.
Thank you so much, Pa Elan. And over to Ms. Monica.
Yeah, I think there are a lot of features and innovations from Kartu Prakerja that could be emulated to other government programs and even other countries. I think the first one is the financial inclusion aspects of Kartu Prakerja, right? As Pa Elan mentioned, that 59% of Kartu Prakerja participants actually open their bank accounts and e-wallet accounts for the first time. So that really helped government's effort in terms of financial inclusion. And then second feature that I find should be emulated to other government programs is the digital-based multi-channel government to people payments, right? So in times like the pandemics, for example, where physical interaction and physical transactions are not possible, then we need this digital-based government to people payments to disperse government social assistance programs. And I think that the third features that should be emulated as well is the really the close partnering with digital training institutes, right? That is like the supply side of trainings, and with the job platforms companies, that is like basically the demand side of training. So this Kartu Prakerja is really creating the market for trainings that perhaps did not exist before Kartu Prakerja before. And just to respond a little bit to Ibu Dani's point, right, about the need for cloud computing and better use of data, and also the integrated ID system. So these three things actually need like broader regulatory framework for digital governance, right? Like when we talk about cloud computing, for example, you know, data centers are very carbon and energy intensive, right? Some countries like Singapore's are already like constrained in terms of building more data centers because it can be in conflict with their net zero carbon emission target, right? So it needs to be built and needs to be powered by, you know, more renewable, more clean energy, right? And then the second about data use, we know that better use of big data has helped a lot of marginal population in terms of accessing loans without any collateral, right? But it also needs better protections in terms of data privacy and consumer rights. And then the third one about integrated ID system, I agree that you know, Indonesia needs to accelerate in its digital ID system. We've seen like in countries like India, you know, that helps a lot in terms of disbursing social assistance programs. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, so much for giving us an Indonesian perspective into this question. Now I have two questions that I would like to merge, if I'm permitted, to Mr. David and Cecilia. The first question to Cecilia, perhaps, is in your view, you know, hearing all the things that you have about the Kartu Prakerja program, and also from your own experience, in your view, what are some of the benefits and challenges to consider in using digitalization to promote decent work for women? And for Mr. David, can you share some examples of other programs that have reached women and vulnerable groups at such a scale and in such a short time as the Prakerja program? And what lessons do these programs hold, in your opinion, for delivering inclusive lifelong learning opportunities? So over to you, Cecilia, very briefly, and then over to Mr. David for that last and very important question, which I think summarizes how we began the session in the first place with your. So over to you, Cecilia.
Thank you so much, Bimbika. Yes, in the interest of time, very quickly, I think that at today's session emerged very clearly that women greatly benefit from digitalization. The digitalization of the labor market brings new opportunities for women in terms of income generating activities and control over a source of personal income, and also, as we are today, as an important source for skilling and new skills and that are quite important, especially for women who are usually the one most likely and more likely to be with less access to formal and informal education. Obviously, this has a positive spillover effect, not just on present generation, on future generations. We know that with women economic empowerment and control over personal income, there are also positive effects on education for children. Usually when women have access to the labor market, higher household income percentage is spent on health and children's education. What I think is very important to consider in the region, in Asia and Pacific, when it comes to the benefit of digitalization, are particularly relevant. This benefit in context where women's participation to the labor market is dictated by social norms and cultural norms, shaping what is their place of work, most likely home-based workers. in these circumstances, obviously, in the region, digitalization and programs that really target these workers can have a multiplier effect. And this brings me to my last point, which is the challenges. Obviously, digitalization has to bring jobs, but also quality jobs. We know that especially the digital platform economy relies heavily on independent workers, which are more likely to be informal workers, unregistered, unprotected. So there is really a need to ensure that there is a constructive dialogue between the government and the private sector partnership to regulate digitalization in order to increase and enhance decent work for all. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Cecilia. Over to you, Mr. David.
Thank you. Maybe I would start by saying two points about also how digitalization can actually benefit to women in terms of access to learning and to the labor market. I mean, first of all, I think that what is really important, and we saw that with this experience, is the flexibility that the technology brings in terms of access to learning, and in particular, the flexibility that mobile technology brings. I think that we have a beautiful illustration of this with this program. But at the same time, one of the challenges and one of the obstacles, which explains also the gender gap in terms of access, relates to the importance of having sufficient digital skills. We speak, of course, of the importance of access in terms of connectivity, in terms of access to the devices. But what is as important is also digital skills, and therefore programs that also provide and develop digital skills to women are very important. When it comes to the international experience regarding similar programs and the lessons learned, I mean, first of all, I would like to say that in terms of the speed of design implementation and the scale of operation, this program is really unique. So I think it is difficult to compare it with other. It's also very innovative in its design. It includes really different aspects, not only in terms of education and training, but also in terms of I would say governance and also, as we saw, financial inclusion. So there are many combined elements that make this program particularly I would say innovative. We recently at UL reviewed a number of programs designed to reach vulnerable groups, including women, through different types of technologies. And I would like to share with you the findings of those, some of the findings of that review. I mean, first of all, there is a lot of evidence now that really, and this has been clearly seen during COVID-19, that technology, and in particular mobile technology, has clearly the potential to reduce, barriers to access to learning. And in particular for the development of applications on platform. So there is a great potential. However, again, the design of those platforms has to take into account, the criteria of, let's say, universal principles, so that the content is truly accessible to all. This is very important. It's not only a matter of compatibility with different devices. It's also about really taking into account criteria of inclusiveness. And this is something which is often overlooked. Now, I'd like also to mention the fact that what is critical in terms of success is the principle of co-construction, involving the beneficiaries in the design also of the program, and giving them also the possibility to express their voice. And I think we saw that this is a very important also principle for Kartu Prakerja. So this gives not only a sense of, I would say, empowerment, but also of ownership of the program. And this is a very important element for success. But at the same time, I'd like to end by saying that well, technology is not really the magic bullet. I mean, there are still a number of issues. Well, connectivity is, of course, in many countries, not universal. So it means that solutions that combine online and offline, content are also very useful in many contexts. Electricity also provision is not always there. The cost of connectivity is often also a big obstacle. And then, of course, we make sure that the content is appropriate, not only in terms of I would say the technical aspect, but also in terms of its culturally appropriateness of the content. So those are very important elements that we've seen from international experience. And I think that to a large extent, I think that those findings echo the outcomes of the evaluations that we've just, the results of the evaluations of Kartu Prakerja that we've just heard. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, we're having such an informative and thought-provoking discussion, but unfortunately, that was the last question that we have time for. Please join me in thanking all the speakers here for sharing your time and your insights with us. And before closing this session, I would like to just, summarize some of the key journeys that we've been through over this past hour. One was, the importance of harnessing digital technology for lifetime learning, focusing on inclusive and productive job growth in particular. We received a very privileged insider's view into Indonesia's flagship skills development program. And I was encouraged to learn from Mr. David that it's not just Indonesia's flagship program, but it's also an unparalleled program globally. We learned so many insights of the program, from what was the impetus behind how the program works, how it works in partnership with others, the digital technology that's leveraged, the budget and commitment that has been provided for the program, and the voice and choice ultimately that users across Indonesia are able to exercise. We also learned about a very robust monitoring and evaluation framework that has driven the program design and also evaluation. And I'm sure there'll be lots and lots of different questions that you will have to the speakers today. So please do share them along, and I'm sure that they will be responded to, and everybody will be glad to have them. So thank you again for joining us in this engaging discussion today. And I will give the screen back to Ms. Alin to close the webinar.
Thank you very much, Bimbika, for leading the discussion very well, very insightful. Thank you once again very much to our wonderful speakers as well as our moderator tonight. Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the Coordinating Ministry for Economic Affairs of the Republic of Indonesia, we would like to say thank you for your active participation on our session tonight. Once again, most of all, thank you very much for all the speakers that gave a very interesting insights on the topic in our discussion. Have a great rest of your day. Have a great weekend. I'm Alin Ratmaja and all the crew signing out. See you again in our next event. Goodbye.
Saya nggak mau hasil dari pelatihan saya cuman ya udah uangnya habis gitu aja. Ini harus berputar kembali. Saya harus pakai ilmu yang saya dapat lagi.
Kuncinya kemajuan negara ini adalah di sumber daya manusia, bukan di sumber daya alam. Sumber daya alam banyak, tetapi kalau SDM-nya tidak mendukung, nggak ada artinya.
Kita, terutama para perempuan yang merupakan pendidik pertama generasi masa depan bangsa, harus menjadi individu yang proaktif dalam mempelajari skill baru dan mengasah skill yang sudah dimiliki untuk membuat diri kita lebih mudah berinovasi dan berjejaring dengan banyak pihak.
Kami di Baking World percaya bahwa perempuan yang berdaya akan memberdayakan generasi penerus bangsa.
Saat itu pandemi sedang naiknya, namun saya bisa membuka usaha gula boga dengan martabak mini manis yang saya ikuti dari bakingworld.id.
Kami ingin memberikan pelatihan fotografi yang berkualitas untuk menciptakan peluang usaha masa depan atau future job.
Saya sebelum ikut pelatihan Kartu Prakerja, pengetahuan tentang penggunaan tata cahaya atau lighting dalam fotografi masih sangat minim. Setelah saya ikut pelatihan, saya jadi tambah referensi, tambah pengetahuan baru tentang penggunaan lighting dalam fotografi.
Sebelum saya ikut pelatihan Kartu Prakerja, saya tidak bisa buat website atau apapun. Setelah saya daftar pelatihan Kartu Prakerja, saya bisa buat website hanya dengan 2 jam.